We are now recording. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, class. It depends on what time are you viewing or seeing this recorded lecture for this week. And I hope, as always, you are on a positive vibe and at the same time you are safe as you watch and as you view our recorded lecture. For this week, we will start talking about writing in general, journalistic writing in general, and dig deeper about writing for TV, writing for radio, for newspapers, and other modes of multimedia. To start our discussion, before we start, and I would like to thank everyone for your participation, for those who have committedly, who have committed to and who are eager to submit their requirements, no, from the very first day of of this semester up until today. So thank you and congratulations to all of you. And I know everyone is struggling, especially in this time of uncertainty, in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. And I understand everyone, and I also hope for the same understanding, no, coming from you as my class, as my students. To start with, let me just share my screen before I start presenting. Oops, baba natin. Oops, nawala yung video. Baba natin saglit. Ayun. I'm back. Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Jerry Luis Urbana. I'm your instructor for Introduction to Multimedia Writing. And for this week, we will be talking about framing a story. So how do we frame a story, Sir Jerry? How do we write a story as future um, um, development communication practitioners, as future journalists, no, as future mamamahayag? How do we frame our stories? How do we make it to a point that we are fair and are we are conflict sensitive as we write our story, as we frame our story? Before we proceed, next slide. I want you to take note, and I want to remind, no, for those of you who have already background with journalistic principles, for those of you who are journalists way back in high school and elementary days, who have attended several press conferences already, that a story can include only some facts about an event, and these facts represent a frame. Take note that not all facts associated with an event can fit into a story because of limitations of space and time. Clash, you cannot write, no, the entire facts, you cannot write the entire happenings in a single journalistic story, in a single journalistic article. The facts included in a story represent a frame. These facts are called, and are combined or are congested in a single frame or view of events, and are never the entire story. Again, take note that you cannot insert all the facts in a single journalistic article. You have to make sure that you select a frame, a type of frame, and um, write the article in a way that it isn't biased, and it is not uh, gawa-gawa lang, dili siya binuhat-buhat lang, kung dili siya pinataka lang. And most importantly, the news article that you are writing isn't fake. Next, journalists or reporters class make choices about which facts to include and what point of view to emphasize. No, the journalist, I mean, uh, future journalists, you guys as future journalists have the option to what? To point out what view are you going to emphasize, and to choose which facts are you going to include. Reporters and editors make choices about what is most important and what is most interesting. As journalists, we have the capacity, we are given the right to select what we think and what we believe based on the principles that we have learned are the most important and the most interesting parts of a situation or a journalistic na article. Those choices represent a single frame on the event, and another journalist might choose For example, si journalist A might choose a different combination of facts, opinions, and images that reflects a distinctly different time. And si journalist B will also do the same. I mean, do the same but with different combination of facts, different combinations of images that he or she believes is appropriate, you know, for the article that he or she is choosing to write. Next, the choice of a frame is a journalistic decision. Once, time and again, I will always say to you and emphasize this to you that we have the right, no, we have the at the right, at the same time the responsibility to choose our frame for a particular journalistic article. Example, let me just transfer the video so that you can see clearly my PowerPoint presentation. I think this lecture is one of the shortest lecture that we are going to, or we are going to have, and that you are going to see, you know, for the entire semester. This is just a quick run through about what framing a story is, and what framing is, and how do we choose a frame, and what are the types of the frame. Anyway, moving forwards. Example, a reporter could write a story about a presidential candidate who makes an embarrassing statement in many different ways. Say, for example, si President Rodrigo Duterte, no reporter could write uh, something about uh, President Duterte being a ano ba President Duterte being a kanang mapang kung sa Bisaya pa mapang yawa o mapamalikas, di ba? But the story could also focus on the simple facts of what the candidate said or what President Duterte has said sa iyang gisulti, no? It's direct to the point. Another frame might focus on the personality of the candidate, personality of a presidential candidate, or personality of a public person, or a person that is that has wide scope of influence as a means of understanding the misstatement. And one article could also, I mean, a journalist could also place the gap, I mean, place it into historical perspective with discussion about prior misstatements by the candidate and what the errors collectively say about the candidate. No? Focusing on the history. Kung sa ba ang mga naingon ni candidate before? Is this situation a recurring one? Is this situation a, what do we call this? Uh, is it a, I mean, is this situation different from the previous situation that have happened before? And what the errors collectively say about the candidate. And a journalist could also focus on the reaction to the comment of the candidate, and including the actions from the public and opinion leaders. It depends, no? Again, it is the choice of the journalist to choose I mean, it is the decision of a journalist to choose a frame that he or she wants, at the same time that he or she thinks is appropriate to a particular journalistic situation. Next slide. What are the common story frames, or what are the story frames that we usually see and observe, no, in several news articles that news outlets are using, like Rappler, like Inquirer, like Philippine Star ngayon, and etc. etc. Sunstar Davao, and other news outlets. Here are the following. First, we have straight news account. This is the very I mean most common na story frames that we see online and in newspapers that we usually read from time to time. The straight news account, when we say straight news account, there is no dominant narrative frame. It is very plain, very direct to the point, other than the outlining the basic 5 W's and 1 H. The who, what, where, when, why, how. We usually see this kind of frame when we watch, and I mean watch news na segments, for example, TV Patrol, etc. etc. And sa GMA, ano ba? I mean, Frontline Pilipinas sa TV5, and sa GMA we have 24 oras. We usually see this kind of story frame, straight news, direct to the point, kung ano yung punto, kung ano yung mga yung pangyayari, yun na yun. Diba? Second, conflict story. A focus on conflict inherent to the situation or brewing among the players. When we say conflict story, it involves the people. No? Kinsa ang naa dito. We have kind of prominent na names involved in a situation. No? How did we arrive into that situation? These are the questions that a journalist writing conflict-sensitive na stories are have to consider. Examples are documentaries. When we write the documentaries, we make sure that it is the journalistic articles that we are writing are conflict sensitive. In CSJ class, conflict sensitive journalism, I will be discussing this to you in the next succeeding weeks as we go along the semester. Third, consensus story. What do we mean by this? When we say consensus story, it is an emphasis on the points of agreement around an issue or event. Emphasis on the points of agreement. What are the things that the parties have agreed? What are the things that the parties have what compromise did the parties reach in order for them to arrive at a decision, particular decision? Next, conjecture story. Conjecture story class focuses naman around conjecture or speculation of what is to come. No? What will be the effect of this situation to the months to come? What will be the effect of the decision that the president has made by last March 2020 in the next succeeding months? I mean, the succeeding months to come, in the effect of the decision of our president not to close borders during the early years of COVID-19, the effects of the violation of the bold sinas, in several na quarantine protocols, to the perception and to the on the part of the people who are also expected, general public are also expected to follow quarantine protocols, things like that. Next, story. When we say story, it is an explanation of the process of something or how something works. We usually see this in documentaries din, diba? Documentaries. If you have my favorite documentarista are of course Ato Marolio, diba? We have Cara David and Miss Jessica Soho actually do some documentaries then before she focused on merely TV reporting and news reporting. Outlook, how the current news fits into history. What are the what are the what are the factors that have happened before that affects the current situation. Next, horse race. Who is winning and who is losing? We usually see this kind of story frame during elections. Diba? Who is the leading candidate? Who is the losing candidate? Trend story. The news as an ongoing trend. Trend story, we see this in feature articles. Diba? We see this in news feature articles that are also being written in several newspapers, online or offline. Next, we have makita ba siya? Okay. Yeah. Next, we have policy explored, a focus on exploring policy and its impact. We see this on articles covered by journalists who are assigned to write articles for the House of Congress, the House of Representatives, who are assigned to cover Malacanang and the President. We have Pia Ranada, if you know her. She's from Rappler. She usually write stories using the story frame. Policy explored. What are the effects of the policies created by or mandated by our government to the general public? What are the effects of the anti-terror law, for example, to the general public? What are the effects of this type of promulgation, this type of policies that the House of Senate, the House of Representatives, and our Congress and the Executive Department have put into, that the Congress have enacted. Next. Reaction story. A reaction story is when a response or reaction from one of the major players. We see this in ngayon kasi may mga ano na din, may mga types of videos na din. But this one is this subject is multimedia writing kasi. We usually see this in several newspapers sa opinion na page. Makikita nyo yan. May mga opinion na parts ang ating writers, ang ating mga journalists, where they're given the platform to express their opinions, to express their takes on issues, on political issues, social issues, or on current happenings. Next, we have reality check. Reality check naman is a simple close look into the veracity of a statement made or information given. For example, a particular government official release a statement on on eradicating crimes for this span of months, di ba? Of course, several journalists will use a story frame called reality check to see if it's feasible, if it's possible to happen, or if it's most likely to happen, or the promise given by that public official will happen in that amount of time. Next, wrongdoing exposed. It is the uncovering of wrongdoing or injustice. We usually see this in investigatory na journalistic articles, investigatory na in multimedia platforms, in television platforms. We see this in Ipaglaban Mo. We see this in Soko, for example, uncovering of wrongdoing or injustice. A journalist write this to help victims, to help normal and kanang civilians to attain the justice and to help the court in administering justice, providing justice back to the people. Personality profile. When we say personality profile, it is a profile of the newsmaker, profile of a particular newsmaker. We have Julius Babaw, profile of Julius Babaw, profile of Ted Filon, profile of Corina Sanchez. Simple profile of the newsmaker. What do they usually do? How do they write stories? How do they cover event coverages, etc., etc. So those are the 13 common story frames that we usually see and we usually observe on journalists, on writers, and on our on TV personalities that we look up to as future practitioners of media and multimedia and development communication. We have straight news account, we have conflict story, consensus story, conjecture story, outlook, horse race, trend story. We have policy explored, reaction story, reality check, wrongdoing exposed, personality profile. Among all of those common story frames, we take note that we do not invent stories, okay? Hindi pwedeng gawa-gawa lang yung mga storyang sinusulat natin at as future journalists, as future media practitioners, and as future development communication practitioners. We need to choose a frame. We just need to choose a frame. We don't invent stories. We don't write fake news. We don't write speculated and chismis. We choose a frame. We have a lot of frames to choose from. 13 pa lang yun, yung mga common na story frames na present ko kanina, but there are lots of story frames that we can choose from. We don't invent stories to come up with a frame para lang may maisulat tayo. We invent na stories na si ganito ganyan, si president ganito, si vice president ganito, may ganitong sinabi, wala naman, 'di ba? We come up with a frame, but we don't invent stories. We don't write fake news. Always remember to include facts, diba? As journalists, we are tasked to combat fake news. We don't add to the fire of that fake news have already created in the online and offline media. It is what the story is all about. Yun yung nangyari. And it is the foundation of the core principles. There are many ways to capture your audience without distorting facts or truths. We don't do clickbaiting here, diba? That we usually see. This disappointing, but we see a lot of clickbaits on online and offline. We don't do that here. As future media practitioners, we are tasked to report what is true, to report what is needed to be reported, critical at the same time, facts, no? Mere facts. Kung ano yung nangyari, yun. There are many ways to capture your audience, but never distort facts or truths. Huwag mong baliin yung katotohanan. So I guess that's it. As I have said, maikli lang yung report natin for today. I mean, maikli lang yung lecture natin for today. I hope in the span of, I think that's only 15 minutes or 20 minutes ba? Nasa 15 or 20 or 10 lang siguro yung lecture natin for today. But I hope you were able to learn something, you were able to get something from our lecture for today. And for Thursday, I will be giving you an activity. There will be no recorded lecture for Thursday. However, we will be having an activity for you to research something about radio and TV and other multimedia platforms. At the same time, I'm thinking of having an online quiz, but this is, of course, I'm giving you the time to prepare, at the same time, the time to work on this quiz. But anyways, for announcements and instructions, I will be posting all of them in our Facebook group. So I hope that you will check our group and at the same time our group chat from time to time. If you have questions, feel free to comment down below. And at the same time, if you have special and emergency concerns, you can contact your BDEL, si Jason, and Jason can course to, everything to me. And at the same time, class, I hope you are safe and I hope that you are enjoying the semester so far. You know it's hard, it's difficult, but your hard work will pay off. No? Months and years from now, babalikan mo na lang at sasabihin mong, thank you Lord for guiding me and for sustaining me as I go through these uncertain times. So yun lang. I hope you were able to learn something today. I hope you're safe and please continue praying for our country, praying for our leaders, and praying for the nation. At the same time, our professors and our families and loved ones around us. We need to back everything up with prayer. We need to back the recovery of our country and our nation with prayer. So yun lang. I hope you're all good and I hope you are all fine. If you have questions and special na cases na yun that cannot be addressed by Jason or by anyone in the class, you can message me as long as it's not past 5 or I mean work hours. It's not past 5 a.m. already. Though I usually stay up late, but I also have other things to to cater and to finish, no, because I am also a full-time na government employee and a full-time law student. So thank you, class, for understanding, and thank you, class, for always for your participation and for always taking the time to understand your professors and at the same time taking the time to review all of my recorded lectures. For today, yun lang. I need to stop sharing the screen already. And thank you so much and God bless us all.